Betrayed by blood and love. My fiancé chose my sister, but I chose myself. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows of my family's living room, casting a golden hue over everything. I sat on the couch, flipping through the pages of a wedding magazine, my thoughts wrapped up in the details of my upcoming wedding. Every picture of a white dress, every floral arrangement, and every beaming bride reminded me that in just a few short months, it would be my turn. I was excited, nervous, and, above all, happy. My fiancé, Liam, was everything I'd ever wanted, kind, handsome, and incredibly supportive. Or so I thought. As I debated the merits of roses versus lilies, I heard the front door open, and in walked my mother. The moment I saw her face, my stomach dropped. There was a gleam in her eyes, a cruel smirk tugging at the corners of her lips. I knew that look all too well. It was the look she got when she was about to deliver a piece of news she knew would hurt. I tried to push down the anxiety that immediately bubbled up inside me. "Hey, Mom," I greeted her, trying to keep my voice light. "What's up?" She didn't respond right away. Instead, she walked over to the armchair opposite me, taking her time as she sat down. She crossed her legs, her smile widening as she leaned back, as if savoring the moment before she spoke. "Oh, nothing much," she finally said, her tone casual, almost too casual. "I just got off the phone with your sister." I stiffened. My sister, Sarah, and I had always had a complicated relationship. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our mother's eyes. Growing up, I was constantly compared to her, how she was prettier, smarter, more charming. It was exhausting trying to live up to those expectations, and over the years, it had driven a wedge between us. "What did she say?" I asked, trying to sound disinterested, but my heart was already pounding in my chest. My mother's grin widened, and she leaned forward slightly, as if about to share a delicious secret. "Well, it seems your dear fiancé, Liam, has been spending quite a bit of time with Sarah lately. A little too much time, if you ask me." Her words hung in the air like a dark cloud. I stared at her, not quite processing what she was saying. "What do you mean?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, come on, Emma," she said, rolling her eyes. "Don't be so naive. They're together. Liam has chosen your sister over you. Isn't that just the funniest thing?" I felt like the ground had just been pulled out from under me. My mother's words echoed in my mind, each one hitting harder than the last. Liam and Sarah? Together? It didn't make sense. They had never shown any interest in each other. At least, not that I had noticed. But the way my mother was looking at me, the smug satisfaction on her face, told me that she wasn't lying. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I blinked them back, refusing to let them fall. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me break down. Not this time. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my efforts to keep it steady. "Because you deserve to know the truth, darling," she replied, her tone mocking. "I thought you should hear it from me first. After all, it's not every day that your fiancé runs off with your sister." I stared at her, the pain in my chest slowly giving way to anger. I had spent my entire life under her thumb, letting her dictate how I should feel, how I should react. But something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the years of pent-up frustration, or maybe it was the realization that Liam was not who I thought he was. Whatever it was, I suddenly felt a surge of strength I hadn't known I possessed. I stood up from the couch, looking down at her. "Is that so?" I said, my voice calm, betraying none of the storm raging inside me. For a moment, my mother's smug expression faltered. She clearly hadn't expected this reaction. She was expecting tears, a breakdown, something she could feed off of, but I wasn't about to give her what she wanted. "Yes, It is, she said, her tone a little less certain now. Aren't you devastated? Why would I be? I shot back, crossing my arms. If Liam is capable of betraying me like that, then he's not the man I thought he was. And if Sarah is willing to do this to me, then she's not the sister I thought she was. They deserve each other. My mother blinked, taken aback by my response. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out how to regain control of the situation. But I wasn't done yet. You know what, Mom? I continued, my voice growing stronger with every word. I'm glad you told me, because now I know who I can trust, and it sure as hell isn't you. Her eyes narrowed, but before she could say anything, I turned on my heel and walked out of the living room. I needed air, space, anything to clear my mind and process what I had just learned. But as I reached the front door, I heard her voice behind me, sharp and laced with anger. Don't you dare walk away from me, young lady! I paused, my hand on the doorknob. The old me would have turned around, would have listened to whatever hurtful thing she had to say next. But not this time. Goodbye, Mom, I said, without turning around. And with that, I opened the door and stepped outside. The cool air hit my face, a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere inside the house. I stood on the front porch for a moment, taking deep breaths, trying to steady my racing heart. Everything felt surreal, like I was in some kind of nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But as I stood there, I realized that this was a turning point. Yes, I had just lost my fiancé and my sister in one fell swoop, but I had also gained something far more valuable. Clarity. I saw my family for what they truly were, and I knew now that I had to start putting myself first, no matter how painful it might be. I pulled out my phone and stared at Liam's contact. My thumb hovered over the call button, but I hesitated. What would be the point? I already knew the truth, and hearing it from him wouldn't change anything. But then, a thought struck me. I deserved to hear it from him, to confront him with the betrayal, if only to give myself closure. I hit the call button, and after a few rings, Liam picked up. His voice sounded casual, like he wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. Hey, Emma, what's up? I didn't waste any time. Is it true, Liam? I asked, my voice steady. Are you with Sarah? There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he tried to come up with an excuse. But finally, he sighed, and I knew that what was coming next would confirm everything. I'm sorry, Emma, he said quietly. I never meant for it to happen this way. It just happened. I didn't want to hurt you. Didn't want to hurt me? I echoed, the anger bubbling up again. You didn't want to hurt me, but you were sneaking around with my sister behind my back? How long, Liam? How long has this been going on? Emma, please, let's not do this over the phone, he pleaded. We should talk about this in person. No, I snapped. We are not talking about this in person. We're not talking about this ever again. We're done, Liam. I hope you and Sarah are very happy together, because you deserve each other. With that, I hung up, not waiting for his response. I felt a mix of emotions: hurt, anger, betrayal. But above all, I felt a sense of finality. It was over. There was no going back. I stood there for a few moments, staring at the phone in my hand, before slipping it back into my pocket. I could hear my mother inside the house, probably fuming that her little plan to break me had backfired. But I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and walked down the steps, heading towards my car. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I needed to get away, to clear my head and figure out what came next. The future was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done being a pawn in my mother's games, and I was done letting people walk all over me. As I drove away, I felt a strange sense of freedom. I had just lost two of the most important people in my life, but I had gained something much more valuable: my self-respect. And as painful as it was, I knew that this was the start of something new, something better. In the days that followed, I moved out of my parents' house and into a small apartment across town. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and that was what mattered. I threw myself into my work, focusing on building a life that was entirely my own, free from the toxic influences that had held me back for so long. Liam and Sarah tried to reach out to me a few times, but I ignored their calls and messages. I didn't need their apologies or their explanations. I had made peace with what had happened, and I was determined to move forward. One evening, a few weeks after the confrontation with my mother, I found myself sitting in a cozy cafe, sipping on a cup of tea and reading a book. The sun was setting outside, casting a warm glow over the small, bustling space. I felt a sense of calm that I hadn't experienced in a long time, a feeling of contentment that came from knowing I was finally on the right path. As I looked around the cafe, I noticed a man sitting a few tables away, engrossed in his laptop. He had a kind face, with dark hair that fell slightly into his eyes, and a relaxed, easygoing demeanor. For a moment, our eyes met, and he smiled, a genuine, warm smile that made me feel noticed. I smiled back, feeling a flutter in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe it was too soon to think about meeting someone new, but at that moment, I realized something important.